you have a social responsibility to make sure that everybody around you is taken care of. And our young folks remind us of that. Like it's not about it's about like, how do I make sure that my friends are good too?
And that responsibility to the people around you, I feel like, there's a saying that says like a rising tide lifts all boats. And I feel like this idea of taking everybody with you is the antidote to a lot of the problems that we're seeing as far as like social isolation and loneliness and people identifying with, if I'm from a certain space, a zip code, if you will, then I'm destined for a certain, I would say, destiny, rather than being able to expand my time horizon. All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle podcast. I'm incredibly excited because I'm sitting across this digital table with Gary Linnen, who is the CEO of PeerForward. Gary, welcome to the show, man.
Good afternoon. How are you? Well, good day, rather.
Man, I'm doing good. I'm really excited to, share your heart and hustle. Today's going to be an amazing conversation, not only about the work that you guys are doing at PeerForward, but why this work is so important to you. Now, I kind of want to ask an opening question here. How's your heart doing today, Gary?
It's Monday. I am still in reflection mode. I would say that just, in light of, let's just call it, where the United States is, just having a recent election and just trying to figure out where the state of America is today. My heart is, in a mode of reflection and just trying to figure out what that may mean for us in the future.
And what are you reflecting on? Let's kind of dive into the conversation a little bit. What are some of the things that are kind of like on your heart these days as we're having these reflective moments on a Monday?
Yeah, it's like I am concerned about the future of the United States, particularly when I'm thinking about, I have two little ones, and I'm always just thinking about, I'm an optimistic person, and the election puts me in a space of like, what do we need to do to make sure the next generation of our young folks have the ability to be in a space where they can thrive and create. So that's at the meta level. Just at the personal level, I'm just always thinking about my little ones. Like, I'm thinking about who's going to pick up my little one right now in a half hour, right? But that's because of the implications of, not having adequate childcare, not daycare. So there's so many like systemic things, and that's where my heart always is. Like, what about tomorrow?
Yeah, as I think about the events that have happened with the announcement of our new elected president, right? We've seen the economy from the stock market and things go crazy, right? Bitcoin and all those things are at all-time highs. And we're talking about economic outcomes when it comes to that type of stuff. But we're talking about a grassroots community-based impact, which is much different from the explosion of the stock market. And so a lot of people are really excited about the future economically of our country, but a lot more people are really worried about what the next generation is going to have the opportunities to take advantage of to be their best self. And it sounds like you're really reflecting on that as well.
I am like, it's funny. Like we have these ebbs and flows whenever there's a major shift in the U.S., policies. And so during any type of, shift in the economics, the policies of our country, we're going to see that. But I am, because I think some of the potential policies can have a major impact one way or the other on the future generation. And I think I feel like we owe it to our children and our grandchildren on what are we doing today that's going to impact them tomorrow, regardless of how the outcome of the elections went. But what are we doing to make sure that we're setting them up? And I think that's just centered in how I'm always thinking.
Why do you do the work that you do at PeerForward? With all the other things that you could be doing with all your time, why is investing into the younger generation something that's so important to you and so close to your heart?
It is because someone invested in me at the end of the day. I was sharing, it was funny, I was having a dinner with someone, another CEO of another nonprofit, and we were talking about our shared experiences being from New York City. And we were all like these thriving young individuals, like what I would consider young. I am 46 and I love it.
Still young, brother.
Yeah, still young. But I mentioned that age because I grew up during the age of, the AIDS epidemic, the crack epidemic, where, as a person from a low income first generation, grew up in a projects center, like I was around this community. We didn't have much. We didn't have anything at all, really. except ourselves. And just being able to be in that community, and then I had the opportunity to leave my community and go because there was like there's something promising because I felt like there was a dark cloud over, us during that time generationally, and it was like, hey, there's something about tomorrow, and I think you have the ability to be able to help us tomorrow. So being able to get chosen, going to a private boarding school, think about it, from Spanish Harlem, and they're like, I'm going to take you and send you to a Quaker school. Number one, I was like, what is Quaker? Couldn't tell you, right? But all I knew was different from my own community. Go there. And so that path changed the entire trajectory of my life because people saw something in me. There was an adult that saw something and it was like, you have promise. Like, that's like really, really cool. And we want to help you. So someone finally saw something in me and I'm like, little old me from, Washington Project. Sure. I'll go ahead and take advantage of this opportunity. And I'm wondering, maybe they didn't know that the reason why they saw something in me is because I have the ability to go ahead and help somebody else. Didn't really understand that multiplier effect, but pouring into me allowed me to be able to see the world in a different perspective. So fast forward, go to, a private boarding school that changed my life, go to Cornell. But the challenge is that I still came home. And every time I came home, I still saw the atrocities of what was happening from a society. Like, I had sisters and brothers and cousins that were just as smart as me, but they were not giving me the same opportunity. And while I'm in these circles of learning how to golf. I'm like, who golfs, right? But I learned how to golf. Like all of these different things that I was not given access to, but because of my network, I now have an access. I have this ability to be able to change things in my future. And so that bothered me. And I was like, I need to change something. And just by going through that type of transition, I was like, let me get back and help my friends. Because there's no reason why they're not getting the same type of help that I'm getting, if you will.
That's a really interesting perspective because often when people are given a step up in life, it's easy for us to say, I'm different from everybody else. I'm going to go down this path because this was my blessing. I don't owe it to the responsibility of going back and helping everybody else out. Why did you think it was necessary to go back and to help other people who didn't have the same advantages of you rather than just navigating your own path because you were chosen for some of these other opportunities people didn't get?
From upbringing, like my family ingrained in us and the way that we were brought up, it was never about me. It was always about us. So how do we as a community make sure that we're uplifting each other, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of where we lived? If I had friends on the east side or the west side, like it was about us. And so for me, I just looked at it differently. I was never let me take it and go. I'm like, let me take it and feed. Let me help everyone else. So I'm just cut from another side of the cloth, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I kind of want to reverse again. So when you had somebody who believed in you, how did that feel when you were a young guy from Spanish Harlem who was given an opportunity? Did you feel like that was a gift that came from the outside? Do you feel like you were always worthy of that opportunity in life? How did you kind of feel when somebody believed in you and gave you the opportunity to go to that private Quaker school?
Didn't feel like it was, it was just this idea of like, I guess I should do it because someone's so take advantage of it. Like there's something there. And my parents, my grandmother always, my mother was like, hey, if someone's giving you a chance, like take advantage of the chance because you never know what the outcome is going to be. And so that is a blessing I will. But I never was like, oh my God, I have to go ahead and like, sure, it's something new. And I think during that time we were excited about trying something new because there was a certain level of like curiosity that came with it.
One of the big things that you guys talk about at PeerForward is fostering social responsibility. What does that mean?
Back to this idea, like it's the I and the we idea. Like, I think we have a social responsibility to making sure that we're uplifting everyone within our community that's within our means, because there's no way that we can operate by ourselves without the next person to the left or the right. And our young folks at PeerForward see that every day because, again, like we were brought into this world around folks. You have a social responsibility to make sure that everybody around you is taken care of. And our young folks remind us of that. Like it's not about it's about like, how do I make sure that my friends are good too?
And that responsibility to the people around you, I feel like, there's a saying that says like a rising tide lifts all boats. And I feel like this idea of taking everybody with you is the antidote to a lot of the problems that we're seeing as far as like social isolation and loneliness and people identifying with, if I'm from a certain space, a zip code, if you will, then I'm destined for a certain, I would say, destiny rather than being able to expand my time horizon. Why do you think that that's so important and thinking bigger from where we come from?
Because a lot of times when we're thinking about the obstacles that are in our way, we tend to focus on that versus looking outside. Like I use this analogy a lot of times with my young folks of, hey, on this side is where I'm at today, and I'm trying to get, 50 yards, 100 yards down the road. And the question is, am I going to look at the obstacle, or am I going to look at the pathway to get around it? And what you're going to find is that when you're trying to get around this pathway, there are other individuals that are trying to do it too, because we all will feel better when it's just us. Like, do you want to be on the other side by yourself? Or when you celebrate, do you love to celebrate with your family and friends? I don't think there's anybody that ever says, I want to go ahead and have a birthday and just be by myself. I want to celebrate. I want to make sure that if there's something that actually happened to a friend of mine that was helpful, or my family member, I want to be able to say congratulations, thank you. Like, those words go a long way. And unfortunately, that type of acknowledgement or celebration has been swept under the rug so much because we've been focusing on the challenges, not focusing on opportunities. And I think we're just cut a little bit differently. Like, life is not set up about challenges, it's about opportunities that come with challenges. The question is, how do you get past it? And the only way you can do it is with community. It's not by yourself. Because even when you get there by yourself, you're still what? Lonely.
Yeah.
End of the day.
I was listening to a podcast one time, and this guy was talking to a very successful CEO who has a little bit of a different preference when it comes to building teams. He said, I've been told a lot that you shouldn't, first of all, hire friends. You first of all should go alone. You first of all should surround yourself with people who didn't come around your neighborhood, because they're going to help elevate your life. But this person said something differently. He said, I think the purpose of life is finding out who you want to live life with and live life to the fullest with them. That means building companies. That means going after things that you're passionate about. It means building up your community and XYZ. Why do you think that we've lost so much of the latter in society, especially from the youth perspective, thinks we need to do everything alone today? Why do you think that's so prevalent?
Because I think sometimes we're actually only uplifting the alone sentiment, right? And you're seeing this one, and we're using them as unicorns. Like, it's, oh my goodness, they did it, and I did it by myself. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. There's this idea that through adversity, you think you've actually done it by yourself. But actually, through adversity, there were individuals that were supporting you on the side that you didn't even know. And we don't get the chance to acknowledge it because we're so tainted in the pain and the trauma that comes with having to feel like you're alone, versus this idea of like, oh my God, there are actually people that have been rooting for me, either publicly or silently rooting for you to win. And I think sometimes we forget about the silent voices. And we need to actually start becoming a little bit more vocal for that very reason, because people are feeling like they're alone, and they're not.
Who were some of the silent voices who were encouraging you as you kind of took a different path and then started doing so much to impact and uplift your community?
That is a great question. From family members, the ones that stopped talking to me, just because we had our own trauma that was growing up. So I found strength in that. Right. It's like, there's a reason why we could not connect, because there were outside forces that stopped us. When I think about our school systems, the silent supporters are the individuals that were in the hallway that said good morning, whether it was a janitor, whether it was a secretary in the school building, that made me smile because they don't know, what it took for me to get up in the morning and walk into that school building. Whether it was somebody, that gave me a ride when someone in my family, we had a traumatic experience, and this is high school, and I couldn't afford to get back home, but they gave me a ride to the train station so I can spend $15 to be able to get back home. That was a silent support, and they didn't have to do it, but they saw something. And so I think about these instances, and I got names behind them of like, wow, just because they gave grace to me, they didn't have to, but it makes me smile today. Like, oh, those are the same people that never stood in the front and was like, yes, yes, Gary. They were quietly like, yes, yes. And I'm helping you the best way I can.
Do you believe in fate?
I do. I do. I think I'm not the biggest religious person at all. I believe in faith. Like there's something better than, greater than all of us. And you have to have faith that things will land the way it's supposed to, because I believe in positive intent, and as much as you, like, if you play your cards, it will come back the way it's supposed to. And you just have to be faithful around it. I stopped believing in this idea that an institution needs to tell me and give me direction on where to go. Like the religious institution, I had to believe that we're all here for a bigger purpose, and just have faith in the way that, we're supposed to interact with each other.
It's been a big process in my maturation, is just believing that things are going to take care of themselves. We have so many, one of the perspectives that I've been able to gain since I've gotten a little bit older is those silent supporters that you talk about. They all have a way in kind of building into the momentum of life, right? We have people who will give us rides, people who stand up and cheer for us when nobody else does, people who pat us on the back. And those are all things that continue to build into the momentum of us accomplishing our goals, which I think is really, really powerful. You said that you have a positive outlook. Have you ever been looked at negatively for having a positive outlook, especially in the world that we live in today that seems like it's so cynical?
From a professional, personal level, it all depends, right? Yeah, because I would say friends and family, like, can you just make a choice? And I'm like, actually, sometimes like things are just going to be okay. I really just do believe in my heart things will be okay. And some people don't believe that, because some people actually, like, it's a trigger for them where they're only focused on that raw emotion of pain, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we're just wired differently. And I'm wired to as much as I can have a positive outlook, where it's like the glass is actually half full, where others like the glass is half empty. Um, and so it's been times where it's been some challenging conversations, and or individuals like, what, I don't know if I can really have you in my circle. I was about to use some other language, but have you in my circle just because you're a little too happy for me. And I'm like, what's wrong with being happy?
I come from the
Even when
exact same
things are.
space.
Pardon?
I come from the exact same space because, part of my own journey is everything has not always been in my control, but I've been able to control my mindset and my outlook on how I come across opportunities, not challenges. And I've caught a lot of flack in my life because I've been toxically positive.
Yeah.
But yet my natural reaction to those people is, have we gotten to a place in society where being optimistic and being positive for a future outcome is looked at as being toxic? So I've had to reframe that into being practical optimism. I'm practical about my current situation, but I'm still going to choose to look at this through an optimistic lens. Practical optimism. What do you kind of think about that framework?
Perfectly aligned. I'm so happy you even use that, like the practical optimism a piece, because that's actually why I gravitated towards PeerForward. Like, we believe in positive peer influence. You hit it on the nose. Like, we always think about the toxicity that happens in our community, and how we influence each other off the negative pieces. But did we ever take a moment to sit back and said, if I said, hello, good morning, you're beautiful, like how that type of mindset shifts individuals to think differently? But if I said, you're bad, you're ugly, you ain't nothing, you're never going to be nothing, that sits with you. The same way that can sit with you is the same way you're beautiful, you're kind, you're sweet, I believe in you, can sit with you. It may take a little bit longer, but it can have the same type of outcome. And I think sometimes we drive ourselves towards the negative side of it. And I just believe, and be clear, like, I'm not the most perky, happiest person every day at all. There's days that I say, why? Like, why am I doing this work? Again, when we started this conversation about reflection, I reflect on why, because there are days that I don't feel as happy. I don't feel as perky. I don't feel as optimistic. But I just acknowledge that that's my feeling. And I get back to, how do I get to a place that brings me joy? And that's an opportunity.
What kind of conversations do you have with yourself when you're not the most positive, not the most optimistic, not the most perky, but you realize you still have to show up for your team and show up for the people who look up to you as that guy who's still going to be able to cast the vision of optimism and everything else that comes along with that?
To be authentic and truthful. I think that is where, even as a leader in this community, Making it seem as if everything is all right is by far the number one, the worst thing you can do, in my personal opinion. Because everything is not all right. Can it be better? Yes. So just acknowledging the conversations, I say, is just acknowledge where you are today. So even, when the election came, I had to literally tell my staff members, like, I need a day to be okay with what I'm feeling. And just giving people that space to be there to reflect, that showed for me, like, individuals like, oh my goodness, like, thank you, you see me. And it doesn't show weakness in your leadership abilities. It actually shows strength in the fact that you're in tune with people's emotions and even with your own emotions. So that's the conversation I have. And when I have to do that, I just need to go and check out. Like, literally don't talk to anybody and watch the most random thing on TV. It's just so that I can give this mind some rest because it's always running. And so that's my way of dealing with challenging emotional things where I don't feel okay.
That sense of self-awareness is an amazing skill set. But I feel like, especially with the world that so many of our youth live in today, of social media and constantly being bombarded by different images, it's not okay to not be okay a lot of the time. We always have that mask of everything's fine, I'm doing great, I'm winning. But often that's not true at all.
It's not. I mean, that's the challenge that we're seeing, particularly with our young folks that have social media at their fingertips all the time. You feel the need to have to be on. You feel the need to have to always show up in a different way. And for us, I think, again, I'm from a different generation where we learn to just know how to go sit in a corner and be quiet. But I'm also guilty of sitting on my phone all day, right? And so it's a muscle that we have to constantly exercise, being able to go back to a corner to find like what refills your cup.
And how do you think we're going to be able to influence this next generation to kind of lean back into, I'll call it the older ways of sitting in the corner, because it's so difficult to maintain and cultivate a positive mindset when everything that you see on social media is outside of your control.
Yeah.
You see so many images from the algorithms and everything that are being force fed to you that it obviously taints the way in which you look at the world, which is really tough for the younger generation because they didn't see the before time, like where we came from.
And I think that what are the elements of the before time that we can bring here? Because they don't need to see it. Same with our predecessors. We didn't have to see it, but there were certain qualities that you can bring to the present and make it relevant to them. And I think that's where we as older individuals have an opportunity to be able to do that. So what made sense to us that they would be able to connect to? And that's like, who are you as an individual? How do you find time to fill your own cup? And what does that mean? And I think this is where we go wrong versus going, turn off your TV. That's not the answer. Or get off your phone. That's not the answer. Question is like, what refills you? And if this is going to be the device, well, how do you use this device to refill you? Because of the sensory overload that's happening. So I think we're, technology-wise, we're in an interesting space, if you will, that generationally we're trying to figure out how to get people off of it. But I'm like, how do you get them to embrace it in a much more positive way or intentional way to be able to help refill individuals, in the environment that they're in?
I mean, how do you think we're supposed to be able to do that, though? With the habits, let's just kind of talk about what normally somebody does today. The first thing they do when they wake up is they reach for their phone, they check what time the alarm's going off, and then they open up to social media. And they're being fed images about maybe how they're not good enough, images of comparison, people who are doing better than them. So how do we kind of instill in this younger generation the ability to compartmentalize what is social and what is real so we can actually give ourselves that space? I'm really interested in your perspective.
That is a very hard question that I think we're all trying to solve for. But I do believe that there's power in just the ability to put it down and look up. Let me just say that, like, actually just look up and what's around you. And the truth a lot of times is literally just right around us. And sometimes we're not looking up at all because we're so confined. And so it seems so simplistic and it's not the biggest answer, but I'm like, look up and talk to somebody to the left of you and to the right of you, and not about your phone, but like, how are you? Mm-hmm. Where are you from? If you think about the digital divide, if you think about like all the social nuances that are on the phone, the images that we see, You'd be surprised how many people feel the same way that you do if you only had a simple conversation with them, not by what social media actually told you about said person.
There's a phenomenon out there. It's called alone together. If you've ever been in a restaurant or something else like that, where you see a whole bunch of people sitting at a table, yet everybody is on their device, they are alone in their own little digital world while being together. Now, I only use that as an example because I've been to a couple like entertainment shows recently where going into the show, there's no filming allowed. So what do? They make you put your phone in a little like Kevlar bag and you lock it. And then when you come out, you can unlock it and have your phone again. It's really interesting what happens when you get in that situation when nobody has their device in a stadium setting. Instead of sitting on our phones, what do? We start conversations with the people in front of us, to the left of us, and behind us. And it's so interesting to think about how, when this device is eliminated, how the humanistic nature of connection automatically comes out. And I feel like people are yearning for that more than ever. But there's this interesting little hesitation when everybody's got their device on them to not start those conversations and have that humanistic connection.
We lost it. Like I've lost it as an adult. I go to these sessions. I'm an extrovert, but I'm also an introvert. Like if you put me in social settings, I'm like the most awkward person unless I have a friend sitting next to me that I can talk, right? But what do? My crutch becomes the phone. And so, we at PeerForward are intentional even when we're going into our trainings during the summer, during dinner. We have a bowl. We say, everyone put your phone in because it forces you to talk and or look down, and the person next to you to tell you, look up, what's your name, where are you from? And I think, again, we've lost that for the very reason of technology. That's become a crutch for us.
And when you think about how you guys are encouraging the next generation, I kind of want to segue a little bit into the conversation of higher education, right? A lot of people have been rethinking what the investment into higher education means for them in their lives. We've seen a lot of people who have decided to not go with college after the pandemic, but it doesn't always seem like college now today is the only answer for success. How are you guys helping younger generations navigate this big choice of either going to a higher institution or going to a trade school, or what kind of things are you encouraging for this next generation?
Oh my goodness, thank you. So hot topic, obviously, right, for individuals. At the end of the day, we're about economic mobility. And what we had to realize is that almost 30 years ago, as a ecosystem, we thought, like, if you just go to college, and we have to be clear on what the definition of college was. Like, if you go to this 4-year institution, you're going to be great. That's what we thought. And what we quickly found out is that the data had not changed. That just going to that, for those that did go, it still did not break the cycle for low income to high income. For those that went to 2-year institutions, we saw a little bit more promise. And for those that went to trade school, there was still promise. And so what we as an organization have decided to do is ask people, like, what do you want to do? Like, what is your end goal? So that I can help you figure out what that pathway is. And if that means that you want to have a meaningful, career, be able to take care of your family, you want to live in said place, I get you to understand, like, okay, this is what you want to do. And what are the different ways in order to get there? If that means a 4-year institution, got it. Let me show you. If that means a 2-year, got it. If that means a trade school, got it. What it won't mean is going to a proprietary institution that's going to rob you. So that's a no for us. But there are thoughtful ways and multiple pathways in order to get to the end goal, not just the main highway that we as an institution or as an educational institution assume would be the appropriate way, if you will. And so we embrace multiple pathways, but just ones that give you sustainability over time, not just a short-term fix on I'm now making $20 an hour, when you could be in the long term making $45, $50, $70 an hour. Like, how do you get people to think about that? Not just about the quick, sticker price of a short-term solution.
It almost starts with thinking with the end in mind.
Correct.
Right. And I don't think that we have a lot of organizations or people who are having that conversation with the younger generation of where do you want to end up, instead of saying what college you're going to go to. Right? Where are we ending? And we can reverse engineer that path so we can accomplish those goals, because today there are so many opportunities for people to pursue. It just matters of starting with the end in mind, which I feel like we're never really asked.
No, because it was the theory of, like, I'm just going to tell you where to go and it will all flourish. That's not the case. Like, it's the writing is on the wall. I think about our young folks who said, hey, I love doing hair. when you're looking for college, I don't say look for hair, right? It's not there. However, if I say, well, let's figure out how you can go ahead and get your credential in hairstyling, but learn how to run your own business. And in order to run your own business, so you can, and I'll always ask them, do you just want to be the person that owns the chair, or do you want to own all chairs in that business so you can make your money? They're like, oh, I run the entire piece. That they will gravitate towards. But being able to say, all right, so cool, we're going to be a hairstylist and it's going to be called Gary's Do. But I own it and I get the chance of it. And the pathway towards that means some type of post-secondary education regardless. And they're okay with that if you understand the value and the relevancy behind that versus go to college. That's it.
So you guys are having conversations about leverage as well, which I think is really important to recognize in this conversation too.
Yes.
Because you can be a hairstylist, which is going to give you certain economic opportunities, but if you own the entire salon, that's a completely different conversation as well. And so we're helping people think bigger as well, is what I'm hearing.
Correct. Yeah. It's like giving them the idea of understanding you can be bigger. And some will choose to say, I literally only want to be the hairstylist, and that is okay. But for those that don't understand the larger ecosystem of it, because they just don't know. And so how do you educate them around it and then, define the pathway towards it?
And then, so we're talking about projecting and thinking bigger for ourselves. But often one thing that I think we really need to dive into here is the conversation about accountability, personal growth, and decision-making that can help us get there. There's an element of responsibility that comes along with these things as well. So how are we kind of thinking about having the tough conversations with, this is probably not going to be an easy path for you, and this is going to take time. How do we kind of, I would say, hammer home the element of responsibility and accountability into this conversation too, with people accomplishing their dreams? What do you think about that?
Critically important. I think generationally, or just we're in a space where we're just, our thought process around accountability and this idea that you're owed something is different. Our perspectives are different. And so how do we get young folks to understand that they actually need to be in the driver's seat of their destiny? And our role and responsibility is to be in the car with them and help support them from the side. But you have to be able to show up. You have to get behind the wheel. I'm not going to continue to drive you. And then, or don't expect that is my responsibility too. Because again, like there's a certain level of independence that young folks need to, that they thrive for, but they don't know how to do. And the only way you can do it is by getting them to do it on their own with coaching, all right? And I think that's what's missing. There's a certain level of coddling these days that we need to get out of. Like, it's going to be okay. No, it's not. Get in the driver's seat. Address your fears.
And that is a conversation about high compassion, right? Because we do hear a lot. I talk to a lot of leaders from higher education and things like that, and they talk about mom and dad being more involved in the higher education process than ever before in previous generations. We're talking about 21, 22, 23-year-old individuals who are having mom and dad advocate for them. So how do we kind of hammer home the element of responsibility that mom and dad aren't going to be able to navigate this path for you, while you also need to be in the driver's seat to make things happen for yourself? There's an element of responsibility in there that I feel like is in direct, I would say, conflict with how kind of parenting styles are today, if that makes sense.
It is. I mean, there is yes. I'd laugh because we do need to have individuals take more ownership of their own pathways, right? And as parents, like there is a responsibility. I have 2 little ones, and I'm always going to make sure that they're taken care of. And I want to make sure that they thrive. But there has to be a sense of self-advocacy that is critical. Because at 35, your parents cannot call your job and ask, where are you? Like they just cannot. What does that mean for you as a young individual? So this idea of self-advocacy has to be centered in the work, and just knowing like who are the communities of support around you so that you win. Like it's about an individual. We use this concept at work about winning the game. If you think about any sports analogy, like your parents on the sideline, they're in the bleachers. Like if the only person that can win the game is you, and that means that you have to play it. Because you are the player. You're literally in the middle of it. You're making the shots. But if your parents get in, game over. Because you'll never learn how to play the game.
I love that analogy. Mom and dad aren't going to come down to the free throw line for you and hit that game-winning shot. You got to put the routine in. You got to take your shots, and you got to get the win. it just seems like it's so difficult because so many, I got a lot of flack being born in 1990 for being a part of like the participation trophy generation. But the one question I always ask when people bring that in a part of like criticism is, who were the ones who are buying those trophies for my generation?
Mm,
I wasn't going to the store as a 7-year-old and saying I need a 7th and an 8th place trophy. There's a responsibility of parenting that also needs to come along and kind of push their children out into the world, because a coddled child is never going to be able to have those conversations for themselves.
correct.
And I'm not trying to come over the top and say we shouldn't support our kids, but there is a balance there that we need to kind of refocus on.
Yeah, I think it's the pendulum has swung where there was this idea of like, go do it by yourself. And then now we was like, I'll help you throughout the entire way. And I'm like, where's the balance of I'll help you as long as it's something that you're willing to do? And how do you take charge and ownership of it? But I will always be here. And so it's, again, being a coach from the side, not sitting on the on the field and like, come on, we're gonna do it together. Like, go sit down and let your child get the, because there's growth and there are learnings in what we consider failure. I mean, for me, I don't even think there's anything about failing. This is about learning. And I think we need to inverse even just that concept, because people think I failed. No, actually, what did you learn from the fact that you did not, become in first place? What was the learning? I need to try harder. Great. So what does that look like for us? Right? What does it mean if you did not pass your driver's test? It doesn't mean that you failed. There are opportunities for you to. So that's the optimistic way of thinking. It's taking everything as a learning factor. Because when we keep thinking about failing, that's when people get in this whole social construct of, I can't do anything. Yes, you can. Actually, you really can. The question is like, so what do we do?
Are you familiar with the growth mindset from Carol Dweck at the University of Stanford?
I'm familiar with the growth. Yes. I'm familiar with the growth mindset ideology versus the deficit. It's like in this whole idea of like, you're an asset. We all have assets. How do you live in that piece? And just lean into your assets. That's it. Everything else will come. But you have assets.
I mean, a powerful question that I often ask myself and my team is like, who are you becoming through this process? Because who you are today is not the fully baked version of yourself. You haven't come across the experiences, the challenges, the adversity that are going to help you build these skill sets so you can be successful down the road, but rather, who are you becoming through this process? And I feel like maybe we've lost a little bit of that perspective of thinking that we are always growing, we are always molding, we are always becoming a next version of ourselves through going through the experiences of failure. Because you never really learn unless you fail, and you have that emotional bite to say, oh man, I never want to do that again. Let's think about how we can attack this problem differently the next time we come across it. And that's where growth comes from.
Correct. Yeah, it's, and it's an interesting concept when you're thinking about it in the school system, allowing individuals to understand, because it makes you relatable. Like, everyone doesn't always, for lack of a better term, win, and that is okay. So how do you have conversations with your friends on, hey, actually, I had a challenging time, so someone can actually relate to you? So when you're thinking about community, the reason why, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Our communities thrive when I have someone that I can relate to that understands that, hey, I'm not having the best day. Are you not having a best day either? So how do we get past it to be able to get towards the end outcome? And when everybody is just, hunky-dory and perky, like, oh my goodness, everything is great. No, it's not, because I actually feel bad today. And so I need somebody else to tell me I feel bad. And the question is, let's state it and say, well, what we're going to do tomorrow, because I don't like this. And that's that growth mindset. That's that empowering. That's that uplifting. That's that sense of positivity that, we need to continue to inject in this community that is so toxic in complacency, toxic in, oh my God, I can't. And they don't see the beauty that the world actually has to offer. And just acknowledging that it's not cute today. It's not.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Like, it's not. It hasn't been forever, but I do have a North Star of like, I have the chance to be a part of something greater so that I can leave it for my little ones, just a smaller 1 inch better than where it was yesterday for my little ones. I've done my job.
There's a real prevalence right now where we talk about with a lot of leaders who are in the education space and youth empowerment, who are talking about the development of soft skills. right? When I came up through school, I was a part of a generation that said, if you perform well on this test, everything else is going to take care of itself on the other side of your education. When I think one thing that I found out very quickly was my ability to communicate, my ability to empathize, my ability to be compassionate, to be kind, to have candorous conversations with people ended up being the skill sets that helped me succeed when it came to my professional and my personal life. Why do you think we are having such an emphasis on the soft skills now rather than just the academic hand-to-hand combat that comes along with our educational experience?
Because academics at the college experience, everything that you learn in that institution, 75% of what you learn is what's more applicable to the workforce versus the books. Like the book that I read in many of my classes, it wasn't about the actual book. It's about the way that I internalized it and how was I able to engage with other folks when we may have a difference of opinion, when we may not understand, like those type of the human interactions. The book is nothing more than a tool. Now, let's be very clear, unless you're a doctor, some technical things, like I need you to pay attention to the book, like to be very clear. But it's a mechanism for us to understand, like the only way that you can have a productive environment around power skills, the ability to have empathy, the ability to work together. I don't care how smart you are. You could be the smartest person in the entire world. If you can't work with individuals, if you can't problem solve, if you can't have this whole emotional intelligence on how people are showing up, then you can't get the greatest outcomes. Will you get some outcomes? Sure, not a problem. You're smart. I'll give you that. But you can have even better. You acknowledge that the soft skills, that's what helps individuals thrive. It's not about the fact that I can show you a resume or I can show you a degree that says I have a 4.0 GPA. That's great. But what does that mean when I need to, when we're in tragedy as an organization? How do you show up for people that have a heart around it? So how do you do the heart work versus the hard work? And I want to delineate the two. Like there's the hard work, that's where your skill sets come in, and we need that. But the hard work is not something that you're trained in. That comes with just the human nature of being around individuals, which is critical.
When did you have that realization in your personal career?
It wasn't until, great question, 2006. I'm going to put a pin in it. 2006, where I did a great job graduating, tried PR. I said no. Then I started working for a for-profit test prep company where like my skill set was on. I was a smart person in the room. So great. But it wasn't fulfilling for me. Right. And that was the thing where I can do it and it's transactional because I'm like, that's the easy part for me. I can show up as a smart person. But the hard work was when I couldn't get somebody to believe in themselves. That is not something that you're taught. But it wasn't until, it was No Child Left Behind, 2006. I was working in Brooklyn. And it took, I'll never forget this day. It was a little fifth grader that I was helping with reading. And she said, thank you. And at the fact that like she brightened up because she could not get the passage. And I just took time just to help her. And I hate reading, just to be clear. So this is not my my subject. If it came to math, I'm the smart one in math. But reading, I was like, oh God, like here we go. My challenge area. But I saw her light up just because I looked at her. So for me, that's where I was like, yo, just believe in individuals. That's the hard work I'm talking about. Then I was like, I need to change the trajectory of what I'm doing. Like something has to change because this is not fulfilling to me. When you continue to do hard work, that's what makes you sleep well at night, even when the work gets hard. Because I believe in humans. I really do. I really, really do.
If you could go back in time, let's call it 10 years to a younger version of Gary, and you had 5 minutes of uninterrupted time where you could hammer home a piece of advice on how he was going to navigate from 10 years ago till right now when he sits across the table from me, what piece of advice would you give to that younger version of yourself?
Believe in your gut and listen to what individuals are saying around you for better or for worse. Because 10 years ago that I did, like my head was still looking like I'm thriving. I'm doing a great job of just being. Look up what's around you. And I think that for me 10 years ago would have been very uplifting, because I didn't believe I would, be where I'm at today, being a CEO today, 10 years ago, because I was looking literally at the ground of doing what I do great, not looking up and willing to challenge myself to do something even better because I didn't believe that I could. And so look up. It's going to be what I would have told myself.
I love that. It's interesting when we have the perspective of time, because we can really give ourselves that truthful advice on how we're going to be able to navigate time. And I'm always playing an exercise in my head about an 85-year-old Keenan. If I were to go to him for advice on how he's navigating this time, what advice would I say? And the advice I would give myself is to enjoy the process more. I feel like I'm always caught up in the element of trying to get from here to there and trying to hit this next mark and trying to get the next customer, that often I don't enjoy the process. But when I get to the very end, the biggest regret that I'll have is that I didn't enjoy the journey, because it goes by so much faster than I really expected to. And I love hearing advice like you gave as well. It's just so important.
No, thank you for even mentioning that, because I would say even 10 years ago, you start thinking about memorable moments. And I can clearly define that I actually don't remember because I was not looking up. I'm so confined. But if you ask me about a project, got it. But I don't remember the lived experience. And that's a challenge for me, right? So you don't get the chance to embrace the beauty. Smell the flowers, as they say. Get up and smell the doggone flowers.
So, Gary, one of the traditions we have here on the podcast is our previous guest wanted to ask you a blind question. Now, their question was, what would you do differently now that you've spent time in your business from how you thought you would do things when you first got started?
Be much more quick on decisions by leveraging the expertise that's around me. And I found that, if you would deliberate just a little bit too long, it's like, just call it. And that goes back to trusting your gut, because the answer is literally sitting right next to you or around you.
Well, Gary, Linnen, I just want to say, man, you are easily the definition of heart and hustle. And I just want to say thank you for having such an amazing heart for impacting the next generation, but also being somebody who demonstrates the hustle of what it takes to be able to impact the next generation in ways that we need for a future in our better society, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. I definitely appreciate that. And same to you, just accolades to just your way of being able to think, construct things. I felt deeply appreciated at being on the show. So thank you, Keenan.
Absolutely, guys. Well, that's another episode of Hart Hustle Podcast. We'll catch you in the next one. Once again, Gary Linnen. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.